Infosys Foundation presents the 4th edition of Arohan Social Innovation Awards.
From rural classrooms to remote healthcare deserts to environmental sustainability, innovation is growing from its grassroots in India. I'm Ridhima Bhatnagar, your host for this very special conversation. And in this special conversation, we shed a spotlight on Infosys Foundation Arohan Social Innovation Awards, now in its 4th edition, to talk about the vision behind it, its evolution over the last few years, and that entire journey of idea to impact. And for that, we have a very special guest joining us. We have the privilege to have Mr. Sumit Virmani, the trustee at Infosys Foundation, who in fact has been very kind enough to take out the time and join us. So Sumit, thank you for doing this and welcome to this conversation, which already is looking very riveting.
Thank you, Ridhima. Thanks for having me. Truly delighted to be here and glad to talk about a project we're all very passionate about.
Absolutely. As we walk the talk, Sumit, I'm very excited to understand this entire journey from idea to impact. But let's step back and I want to begin from where did this inspiration of Arohan, the Social Innovation Awards, really come from? And what is the kind of evolution that you've seen over the last few years?
So, Ridhima, the inspiration for Arohan is the former chairperson of the Infosys Foundation, Mrs. Sudha Murthy. As you're aware, Mrs. Murthy was the chairperson for Infosys Foundation for over 25 years. And during that time, she's really traveled the length and breadth of this country and worked with causes and individuals. And she believed deeply in the idea that problems of grassroots have to be actually solved by people who are experiencing this problem day in and day out and coming up with ideas that have the potential to be scaled. That really was the thought that triggered the birth of Arohan, because the idea was if someone has to give a platform for these social innovators, that's the only way recognition will transform into a reward and reward will transform into impact at scale. So that really is what triggered the idea. And to your second question, the journey over the last 4 years and how it has evolved. It started off by being a platform to recognize brilliant ideas. But over the years, since we have now seen 3 successful editions of Arohan, we are now on the verge of the 4th one. Clearly, the platform has created an ecosystem of innovators. It's not just become a platform for recognition, but that platform has given these innovators an opportunity to scale their ideas, reach out for larger funding support, reach out for larger incubation support. It's truly become an institution in itself. And that's what makes it so much more exciting, because today now we have a whole bunch of social innovators that have come from the last 3 editions, whose numbers and impact shows that the platform has been a resounding success in triggering a change, or rather triggering a beginning of a change. Hopefully that has a long way to go.
Yeah, beautiful. You know, before I talk to you a little more about the kind of stories that have really come to forth over the last few years, I also want to understand from your own experience that because now we're seeing the 4th edition, what has been your own understanding about the evolution of social innovation in India as well?
I have been very privileged to be associated with this platform from the very beginning. I had a chance to conceptualize it along with Mrs. Murthy and then test how some of the experiments that we conducted actually evolved. And if I were to actually summarize my top takeaways, one, of course, ideas can truly come from anywhere. And the real ideas with real impact and credibility normally comes from people who've either experienced the pain themselves or they've actually experienced someone else, one of their loved ones, experiencing that pain. That's when the passion of the founders comes into play. The second dimension, I would say, is that more often than not, in the world of startups, in the world of ideas and funding, normally prototypes are given less importance than finished projects. And however, in the space of social innovation, we've seen that it's important to recognize and support prototypes, because that's when some of the really strong ideas get wings to fly. And finally, if we have to solve problem for scale for our country and our nation, where affordability, access, and inclusivity is a huge priority. Getting the idea turbocharged by tech is where the real impact lies. So that's, I would say, would be the summary and the learnings over the last 3 years, personally for me.
How lovely. And of course, it's like a little baby that you've seen grow, literally, as you said. But you mentioned prototype, and that is actually very, very interesting. That what is the idea behind encouraging prototypes, right? How does it align with the larger vision or what you're planning to do with Arohan and the Social Innovation Awards?
Well, Ridhima, first of all, it's important to understand that at Arohan, we support the entire life cycle. We support the prototypes, we support finished projects. Basically, we support the life cycle of innovation. Now, to come back to your question of why prototypes, I think the answer lies in the question itself, because in the world of social innovation, what typically happens is that an individual who comes up with the idea has experienced the problem on the ground. More often than not, they're coming from remote parts of our country where they have experienced this problem firsthand. They may not have the resources to even convert prototype into a finished product. And if that stage is not supported, an incredibly powerful idea dies. And that's where we realized early on that if we have to truly turbocharge and power this whole engine, it needs to be supporting ideas which have the potential to scale, whether they are at a prototype stage or at a final project stage. Now, I'm happy to share with you a couple of examples to bring home the point, because nothing like looking at a real idea and a real problem to solve at scale.
Always.
And in fact, one of the very first winners from the very first edition of Arohan was this gentleman called Prashant, who is an engineer who witnessed a young 7-year-old who unfortunately did not have both her arms. And he was, of course, moved by the tragedy of a young child. And he said, okay, I would like to help her. Being an engineer himself, he said, okay, let me try and figure out how can I really give her prosthetic arms. And he realized that if he has to find existing solution in the marketplace, it's going to cost several lakhs of rupees. And this is a young growing child, which means she will need updations to those prosthetic arms every few years. That means the cost of sustaining it is going to be unaffordable to an underprivileged section of the society, forget anybody else. So what he thought was, why not use my engineering skills and create a tech-powered solution that can be scaled? And that's what led to the launch of Inaliam, which was the winner of the first edition of Arohan, a prototype at best. In fact, he even brought a person along with him when he came to present, to just show how it works, because the product was not finished yet. And Arohan supported it. Subsequent to that success, he got a platform which took him to KBC, which took him to Shark Tank, and subsequently the scale has helped him provide free prosthetic arms to 15,000 people across the country, and his vision is much larger. So the point I'm making is that sometimes ideas with the power to change the world don't necessarily have to be finished. They have to be ready for change. That's all. And someone has to identify them.
How lovely. Somebody needs to identify it, actually really is the biggest challenge, and we'll get to that in the later part of the conversation. But you must be feeling so proud when you hear these stories, and that also in a way must be becoming the driver and the motivation to take this initiative forward, right?
We certainly are glad that the platform that started off as a dream, an intent of bringing about change, today has created a chain reaction of its own. We today get thousands and thousands of participants from remotest parts of the country who want to come in and participate. I think something that became even more clearer to us, that when it comes to social innovation, recognition is a very common thing that we hear from founders. What we don't hear adequately enough is reward. Because recognition is good enough to be celebrated, but in the absence of it being rewarded with real cash, the opportunity for it to scale dies early on.
Well, that sounds encouraging, Sumit. But let's talk about the sectors that are covered as part of the solutions, right? Which are healthcare, education, and environmental sustainability. So I'm very curious to understand one, how did you narrow it down to these three sectors? And more importantly, how do they align in the larger vision of what you plan to achieve?
So, Ridhima, if you look at the three sectors, education, healthcare, and environmental sustainability, these are foundational pillars of human progress for any society. Uh, Progress across these three pillars signals progress across society. If you look at our country itself, now we've the desire to become Viksit Bharat by 2047. We really would like to ensure that as part of that journey, education, healthcare, and sustainable solutions become equitably accessible to every citizen. So it's clearly an important set of pillars for nation building. And if you were to look at our perspective as a foundation, we've been working on these three pillars over the last nearly 3 decades. Education, healthcare, and environmental sustainability are three of the most important focus areas of the foundation, keeping in mind the larger objective that I explained. So, since it largely converged with what we are trying to do, and of course what's important for the society at large, we realized that should be the big focus for the awards as well. So we can actually then scale the effort in the direction that the country needs.
What is also very interesting, Sumit, is that with Arohan Social Innovation Awards, which is very different with some of the other awards, is that it doesn't just stop at recognition. You go one step ahead with reward, right? And the reward is of almost 2 crores that you've put out. So I wanted to understand what was the idea behind that to make that distinction, and how have you seen that really push out some of the stories of social innovation across the country?
No, I think that's a great question, and thanks for raising it, because we have heard this from several social innovators over the years that we've interacted with. Social innovation has been in existence for ages, and we normally hear that successes are often recognized at different platforms, but very rarely are those recognitions followed through with a prize money or a sizable prize money that can give wings for the idea to fly. So that's where the whole idea was, that we want to be able to create a platform which can create not just recognition but impact at scale. And to create impact at scale, you need investments. And we just wanted this reward to be a beginning for something much larger for the person who's created the idea. And we've seen that happen over the years. I mean, we've seen multiple folks who've been recognized by Arohan have then gone on to secure much larger funding as a result of this recognition and reward. We've seen they get exposed to an ecosystem of innovators, ecosystem of supporters and sponsors. Many people have been on Shark Tank. Some of them have their not-for-profit and for-profit arms, which I think is absolutely fine as long as it's helping solve the problem for the country at scale, and it's ensuring equitable access to all.
Absolutely. Sumit, the conversation is far from done because the story is far from done. This is also our cue, ladies and gentlemen, to slip into a very short break. But when we come back, we continue discussing the fascinating journey of Arohan Social Innovation Awards to try and understand how we go from idea to impact. So stay with us.
Infosys Foundation presents the 4th edition of Arohan Social Innovation Awards. Infosys Foundation presents the 4th edition of Arohan Social Innovation Awards.
Welcome Welcome back. Thank you for staying with us. We're still in conversation with Mr. Sumit Virmani, the trustee at Infosys Foundation, and we continue to talk about purpose-driven tech and the real-world impact and this entire journey through Arohan, the Social Innovation Awards, which are now in its 4th edition. So Sumit, the conversation already has been very fascinating, but as I said, it's far from done. So I want to talk a little more about the stories that have really come to fore, right? Talk to me about one, or maybe even more than one, a story where you saw social innovation that fundamentally maybe changed your understanding of what was happening at the grassroots in our own very country.
I'll give you a couple. Because you're right. After all, uh, what's most endearing about this platform is the power of the stories that come to the fore. And like I mentioned earlier, some of these stories are of people who've seen the problems and pain up close and personal. And one of the story is of, again, I think the first edition or the second edition winner called Modha pedal operating machine. Now, as you know, in the handloom weaver industry, over 70% people are women.
Yeah.
And it's largely manual loom that individuals actually use to do this weaving, and as a result of the manual process, a typical human being ends up picking up about 25 to 40 kgs of weight, 5,000 to 8,000 times a day to actually create these weaving patterns. And as a result of repeated exposure, it causes issues with the knees, issues with the back. And he said, this is actually threatening not just health, but livelihoods of people, because if they are not in a position to even handle this weight, their livelihoods are at risk. He, of course, used his imagination, used his inspiration, and created this machine, a simple pedal machine, which transfers the weight from the individual to the pedal. And that tiny idea, once again, was a prototype to our earlier discussion, came to the fore, and we realized it has the power to change thousands of lives at a very small cost. So once again, you saw individual brilliance and imagination with a little bit of tech at play, and a brilliant product is in place. Another great example is a CPAP machine called SANS. Now, as you know, thousands of babies in our country, when they don't have access to appropriate breathing support, they're not able to make it. And the innovator here saw one of the babies being manually intubated in an auto rickshaw while going to the hospital when he needed urgent breathing support. And because he didn't get it in time, he passed away. And that triggered the idea of SANS, a portable CPAP machine that does not need continuous electricity.
Oh, wow.
That can be run on battery, it can run on car pop plugs, it can be run on even hand pump driven support.
Oh, wow.
And it's now supporting thousands of hospitals, and has got access to a community where such a basic need can solve millions of lives. So to your question earlier, one of the biggest inspiration over the years through seeing these multiple ideas and products is that folks have used the power of tech to truly make innovations both affordable and scalable. And we've realized that this has been a common theme across many ideas. And if Arohan as a platform is encouraging more adoption of technology towards affordability and scalability, then that's really the original mission of solving societal problems at scale.
How lovely. Of course, I will talk to you in a little bit about how you see this panning out now. But I do have to ask you, you spoke about this a short while ago, that the idea also is to be extremely inclusive, right? So how are you ensuring that Arohan also reaches the rural areas, unserved areas? How do you ensure that it is far more inclusive in its approach as well?
That's a great question, and you're right, because if you're looking at inviting participants from the remotest part of the country, most of them don't have access to these platforms.
Exactly.
They don't have awareness. They don't have affordability. They possibly don't even have the language skills. And this was something that actually came to fore in the very first edition of the award, because one of the participants from Karnataka, if I remember right, was actually presenting his idea of a solar-powered insect capture machine, and he was struggling with the language. And Mrs. Murthy steps up and says, "You know what? I will translate the questions for you in Kannada," and she became literally the intermediary between the judging panel and the participant, and that in some sense triggered the thought that we have to truly make the platform equally accessible to all.
Absolutely, yeah.
And as a result, what the teams have done over the years now is that today we have special teams which are set up to help any innovator from anywhere in the country to reach out and help with, say, application filling, help with the process of creating their submission. There's a round the clock helpline available which can solve any give any answers to the problems of, okay, I'm not able to figure out what exactly do you seek in this part, and they will give you instant answer or guide you through the journey. So the idea simply is that the platform is truly designed for everyone who has an idea to be able to leverage the opportunity of the platform, and whatever help we can provide in the journey, we are more than keen to provide.
I just because you mentioned the qualification process and how Mrs. Murthy actually became like an intermediary, I've just gotten a little curious to understand, what does this entire entry and qualification process actually look like? Are there certain parameters that you put down of while choosing? Because the kind of growth and stories that we're seeing are so many, right? So how do you decide which one gets the platform and the reward?
So, like I mentioned earlier, because the platform is now grown in scale, thousands of participants hope to actually make it to the final judging round. There is, of course, multi-stage process that is involved, that involves online application submission, which is then audited by a group of people. Every single application is audited, and the auditing process then identifies about 30 to 40 ideas which should go into the final round. And then once the final round is scheduled, each of these participants, anywhere they are in the country, are they actually flown into present in front of the judging panel. The judging panel consists of people from the foundation, from the social sector, from the experts in the category that we are evaluating. So you have like a cross section of opinions, and then each of the participant gets to present and showcase their prototype or product to this judging panel. And based on that, I think typically it's been a 2-day exercise that we all get to experience these ideas firsthand, get inspired, and towards the end of it really recognize the final shortlist, which are then awarded in another function that where the platform really makes them visible to everyone.
How lovely. Sumit, I have to now ask you this as we move towards the close of this conversation, that where do you see this now headed? We're talking about the 4th edition, and I'm asking not just in terms of your vision as awards, but this being a social movement as well.
Recognition to reward was one transition, and I think that transition now has been fairly institutionalized. But one thing that we have learned over these 3 editions is that if this has to be sustained for impact, it needs a little more than just reward. It needs guidance, it needs mentorship, it potentially also needs incubation. So what we are aiming to do as the award evolves is create this ecosystem of winners and innovators so they can actually learn from each other's successes and failures. So you're not repeating the mistake that someone else has already found a way of hurdling through this journey. So that community is now accessible to the group of innovators. And second, we are of course looking at seeing how we can really connect this group of innovators with formal incubators. So some of these ideas have to really get the support of a strong startup ecosystem. Then they should get that expertise as well. So that's really where we feel the real potential of Arohan is to be able to take a brilliant prototype from recognition, potentially all the way to mentorship and incubation.
Yeah, how lovely. Sumit, before I let you go, I have to ask you, give us one message for social innovators across the country.
Bring your heart to the problem, because clearly passion is what drives this movement. And think scale. Take a leap with tech. A combination of a great idea with a potential to scale, made affordable and equitable with tech, has I would say, the fastest shot to success.
A big thank you for all those very valuable insights, and of course, a big thank you to our lovely audience for tuning in. But before we go, if you do have social innovation in education, healthcare, and environmental sustainability, you do stand a chance to win 50 lakh rupees plus incubation plus mentorship. All you need to do is apply on www.infosys.arohan.org before the 15th of June 2025.
Infosys Foundation presents the 4th edition of Arohan Social Innovation Awards.